Hello everyone and welcome to my Java programming tutorial. In this video we will talk about classes and objects. So Java 1 and Java 2, the title comes with object-oriented programming. So the object-oriented programming concept is based on classes and objects. So from the very first video of Java, we are creating a class, and then in that class we are writing a program. So if you take a look in classes and objects, so class is like a module where you are writing your code. An object is an entity, so class is like a blueprint. So we will be creating classes one, and then we will create multiple objects of that class. So this is like a blueprint which we have talked about, I think, in my first video as well. So this is an iPod. So you have an blueprint of iPod in front of you. In that blueprint you have state and behavior. State is like current song, volume, battery life, and behavior is like what behavior is like characteristics of that blueprint. So if I'm creating an iPod, so every behavior remains the same, so state is changed. So every iPod who is using that blueprint will be changing the state. So everyone will play a different song at a different volume and will have a different battery life. But every iPod functioning is same. Every iPod will turn powered on and off, and then you can change the song in every iPod. You can change the volume in every iPod, and then you may have an option of putting your iPod on random songs. So it will play every time. It will just pick a random song and it will start playing, right? So this is what you have is a class, what you design, and then you are creating multiple objects of that one class. So this will remove the dependency part. So you are just creating the classes once, and then every other object is using that blueprint in their own way. So the main four pillars of object-oriented programming is abstraction, encapsulation, polymorphism, and inheritance. So in this video, we will talk about abstraction and encapsulation. So in abstraction, just take a look. What we have in front of us is an iPod. So what is abstraction? That you are a programmer and then you have a client. So client is your user. So when you are a programmer, you don't want to show your information to the user. So when you go to Best Buy, you buy something, some electronic product, maybe you buy an iPod, you buy some speakers, any electronic device. There is a white sticker at the back which says, if you open this product, no returns and no exchange. So that means if you open, when you purchase this iPod and you open it with a screwdriver, and then you are like, I'm not able to put it back, or maybe you were lucky to put the whole thing back, but that product is not functioning now. So that is your call. Like as a user, you are a user at this point. So that's why when you design a product or when you write a code, you want to make sure that you make it private so that no one can mess up with your code. So that's what we call is abstraction, that you know how to use this product, but you don't know what's inside or how that product is working, and you don't want to know it, right? Because that's not your invention, I would say. So when it's your invention, then you know each and every detail of your product, like each and every part of your programming, that if you change this variable, if you change this class name, what will happen. So this is what we call as abstraction. So now we have a task. So what we will do is we will create a small example based on point, and with that example we will learn the concept of classes and objects. So this is my Eclipse. Now let's just pick a random project. I'm just creating an example. So I will be creating a new class. So from now on, what we will be doing is every time we will create two classes. One is your programmer's class and the other one will be the client class. Client class will have the main method. So this is like my programmer class, which is point, let's say finish. And in this class, I will just add int x, two coordinates, int y. So what these two coordinates are doing right now is they look like variables, like simple variables of integer data type, but in this case, as I don't have a main method in this class, so they are acting as fields. Fields are part of every object you are creating. So this is your point, nothing else, nothing special, just trying to have a basic example of classes and objects. Now, as I mentioned, from now on we will be creating two classes. So the next class will be it will be client. Just to be more specific, you can name it any other class if you can remember that this is your user class and the other one is your programmers class. In your client class, what we will be doing is, we first of all we will write our main method, which will be public static void main square brackets arguments, and then inside of our main we will be creating the object of that class. So what was the class name? Our class name was point. So I will be creating the object. How to create an object? You write the class name with capital P. So my P was capital over here when I created that class. Java is case sensitive, so if your P was capital, it will be capital while you are creating the object. So how you create an object? You write the class name and then you give a name. So I'm just giving P1. You can give any name over here, point 1, point 2, whatever. You cannot name the same class name. So P1 equals to new. So new is a keyword which represents that you are creating an object. If you don't use new, it means that's not an object. So whenever you are using a new keyword, it means you are about to create the object of the class. So this is again the class name, open close parenthesis and semicolon. So this is how you created one object, which is P1 of point class. Again, if I want to create more objects in the same way, I'm just copy and pasting the statement but you have to change the name. You can say P2, P3, P4, and you can create thousands of objects or as many objects you want. Okay, so you can create multiple objects but with different name, and you have to mention the class name, that how you are creating the object of that class. Now in this class, now what we can do with this object is, as we already know that in point class, what do we have in point class? We don't have anything special in our point class, just two values and x and y. If you notice, this x and y have no value, right? They are just declared, so they are known as fields. I will explain like a little bit more with an example, like what's the difference of fields and variables. So right now they are fields, they are not variables. What are variables? Variables are the a temporary storage, I would say. So when you create a variable, you can change the value throughout the code. But in this case over here, every object comes with those fields. So if I have this P1, this P1 have its own x and y value, and P2 will have its own x and y. So let's assign the values. So I would say P1.x you are equals to 6 and P1.y you are equals to 9. So does it mean that when you are printing P2 that P2 also have the same value 6 and 9? No, the state is different. Remember the example from this slide? So this is the state, remember, these are the states, so those x and y are the states. So every object, iPod 1, iPod 2, iPod 3, they have different states, right? So same case over here, we have different states. So let's print system.out.println. I would say let's print p2.x. So let's say what p2.x holds for us. Let's run the code. And p2.x is 0 because by default integer, because of the integer data type, the default values are 0. Let's say p1.x. So we have not assigned any value to p2, that's why it was 0. But for p1 we have assigned p1x is 6 and p1y is 9. So as you can see, when I said p1.x, it printed 6, and for p2x it was 0. So let's assign p2.x you are equals to 99 and p2.y you are equals to 77, something like this. And then again on the next statement, let's copy this and I will say p2.x. Now I'm printing both, so let's run. So I have 6 and I have 99, so this is correct, right? So this is classes and objects. So what you are doing is you are creating multiple classes, and you can create as many classes as you want, and there will be one main method if those all of the classes are connecting. So you cannot write main method in your programmer class. Without this main method, this class is not running. So this class is acting as a module. A module is a place where you're just writing a piece of instruction or a piece of, so in your point class you only have two fields right now, int x, int y. Let's go back to our client. So you can create multiple objects, assign multiple values, p1.x, p2.y. So this is what we call as abstraction. You have created a distance between two things. You have created distance between your programmer's class and then your client. So those two are separate, and you are connecting them through by creating objects in your main method. Okay, so the next thing we can do is creating a constructor. So constructors are very important. So whenever you are creating constructor, goes over here. So when you are creating constructor, there are some rules for constructor. All are always public, and they have the same class name as point. So our class name is point, so they have same class name. Constructors don't have return type, not even void. So you will not even write void. So this is how you create a constructor, open close parenthesis. And constructors, you can create multiple constructors depending on number of fields you have. So constructor is basically like taking an input value while creating an object. So when an object is created over here in your client class, this is where your constructor call goes. Right now it's blank. It means Java is using the default constructor. That's why we didn't get any errors. But if you are creating a constructor which is parameterized constructor, because when you pass something, you have to pass or ask the value int x, int y, like this. Again, constructors are created depending on number of parameters you have. So in this constructor, what I am doing is I'm asking user that when you create a point object, you need to pass me the x and y value. Otherwise, I will not accept. So I'm using a keyword, this dot x equals to x, semicolon, this dot y equals to y, semicolon. Okay, so this, as you can see, it's a keyword which turns in red color. It's a keyword in Java, and it represents for the reference part. So right now, this x and this x is same. So compiler will be confused if I just write Control X. If I just write x equals to x, does this make sense that which x to assign which x? No. So that's why I entered this dot x, which will eliminate the difference. So it will tell compiler that this is the field and this is the variable. As you can see, my fields are in blue color and variables just like in brownish color I have, right? So, and this is not important that you have to use x and y. You can name it x1, y1, then you don't have to use this keyword. It will not make a difference. So removing x1 and y1. Why I am using the same name? Because sometimes right now we are writing just like 5 to 6 lines of code. That is not that much, but when you are working on large softwares, you have to use the same variable name, because it helps you in future after 5 years when you are reading your code, that why you are assigning these values and what are the meaning of those values. So after if like 5 years I look at this, so I can see that this x is same. It's the value of my field which has been assigned to the fields of this class. So this is one constructor. If you go after creating this constructor, if I go back to my client class, there are errors. 2 errors on my client, in my client class, on 2 lines when you are creating an object. So if you read the error, it says the constructor point is undefined. So now you cannot pass this blank. So at first, when you don't have any constructor in your class, Java was using the default constructor. But now as you have created a constructor, Java is giving you an error that you need to fix this because I cannot identify the default constructor. So what you have to do is, this means that now you have to pass the value of your x and y. So this is x, this is y, again for 3, 4, let's say, or just something else, 7, just to make it a difference. And then you can comment these statements out. So as you can see, now you are saving, like we saved 4 of the lines, x, y, maybe there are like 5 different variables. Right now in this case we have only 2. So even when you have like 5 different variables, and then you have to go, especially for every object, 5 times you have to initialize all of those things. So that is time consuming. So this is saving your time and saving your number of lines you have, and make it your code is becoming more readable. So now as you can see, I have just commented all these 4 statements out. So it means my x value for p1 is 2 and x value for p2 is 3. and I'm only printing X and Y. Sorry, X. You can print Y as well. It's the same. So this is what constructor do to your code. Now for the Y, you are saying 4 and 7. Okay. So if you want the previous version as well, like you are maybe you are giving user an option that maybe you don't know the value of X and Y, you can assign those values later, create the object right now, but right now in your code, as you can see, it's giving you an error. So you can fix that error by creating the constructor. As I mentioned, you can create multiple constructors of different parameters. So in this one, it's gonna be like the previous one. I'm creating the default constructor, and what this default constructor will do, this dot X equals to 0 and this dot Y equals to 0. Like I'm just creating a default constructor just like the previous version. Now when you go back and let's pass the value of X and Y, because I don't know the values, maybe I will assign it later when I will ask from the user, something like this. So now there is no error, and yes, you can also print the value. So let's say p3.y. Let's see what p3.y is, and it's 0 by default, right? So this is how your constructor works. So you, for constructors, they are always public. They have the same class name just like this one, and there is no return type for constructors. If you don't have a constructor in your class, Java will use the default constructor. And once you create your parameterized constructor in your class, then your default constructor, which compiler was using before, will not work. To make it work, you have to write it down in your programmer's class. So this was about classes, objects, abstraction, and constructors. Now let's take a look. One more thing. I'm removing these comments part. And you can also make a change later. For example, when I said p1 is equals to 2 and 4, like X is 2 and 4, maybe later on I want to change and say, hey, p1 dot X, you are not 2, you are 5, let's say, like this. And when you run, so p1 X value, let's print and see if the value is changed. So this is, and now it's printing 5. So this is known as accessing the values and mutating the value. Accessing means this is, you are directly accessing the fields and you are changing the values of the fields, which is not good in programming, which is not good at all, because you don't want user to directly attack your fields. Because right now, again, I'm repeating, this is a very small example of point, which is not making any sense at all. Like, what is point X and Y? I don't care if anyone hack my X and Y values, but just take a look. If this is this is a class of bank account and your fields are deposit and like bank balance, and anyone can access your values and change it, right? So that's not good. So what here comes encapsulation, forces abstraction. So now we have separated two things, right? We have separated the user and the programmer part, right? So now you have to force more restriction by making your fields private. So as we have seen the public keyword a lot, now I will be making my fields as private. So make sure that turns red, and private is a keyword. After you make your fields private, let's go back. So there is no errors in this class. Let's go back into our client and see if we have an error. So yes, we have 3 errors so far. Now, after making your fields private, you cannot access the fields. No one outside of the class can access the fields. So if you read the error, the field point.x is not visible. So it means once you have assigned the values, user cannot directly touch your fields, even not print it. So here comes the issue when you are, for example, this is your grade book. So when you take an example of your grade book, can you see your grades, right? You can see your grades, but can you change your grades? No. So maybe you are giving a little feasibility in this case, like you're giving a chance that user at least see the values. In this case, user is not even want to see p1.x and p3.y. Your code is not letting user to see the values. So maybe we are like, okay, we will give an option user to see the values, but not to change the values. So when you are using the private keyword and you want to give like options to user, we have getters and setter method. Getter method, just like by the name, get me that value. It just gives you the value, like print you the value. Setter method means changing the value as well. But now let's take a look. First of all, in this case, we are just letting user to at least get the value, like see the values what we have, and getters and setters are always public. You cannot make it private. If you make them private, then there is no point of getters and setters. So as you are returning according to the data type we have at the top, int x, so you will be writing get x method, starting curly braces and ending curly braces, return the value of x. That's it. This is what your getter method of x. Then you will be writing getter method of y. So it depends. Maybe you want user to see the value of x and don't want to see the value of y. You can just create getter of x and you don't have to create getter of y. So if you do that, then user cannot see the value of y. But in this case, just giving you an example, so return y and semicolon. So now you have created getter and getter, only getters of x and y. User will be able to see the value, but as you can see, the error is still there. What we have to do is we have to make a change. Now user have to go through a method to see a value. So if you want to see a value of, let's say, p2 x value, so it will be p2 dot get x. Same, now you want to see a value of p1 dot get x, run, and p2x is 3, p1x is 2, and that is correct. So now you have to go through a method. You are giving a hard time to user a little bit, that you cannot just directly go to the fields and get the values. The other methods we have, if you want a user to change the value of x, they can only change the value of x and cannot change the value of y. So you will only write setter method for x and not for y. So usually students ask that why we are giving an option, why we are making it private if you are writing the setter method. Setter method is basically you are restricting the user. It's like you are creating a security that user have to go through a method. So again, this is a small example. So, and the return type will be void, as this is setting the value. So you will get the value from user. So int give me the new value and I will assign it to my field. You are not assigning it to the field. So it will be again this dot x, so that user know that this is the value of x of my field, not of the variable. Same goes with the setter method for y, set y, and we are asking the value of y, and then this dot y equals to y. Now when you go back and you want to change the value of, let's say, p2 y, so it will be, you have to go through a method. So you will say p2 dot set x, so the p2 x value, let's say from 3 it will be 56, right? And then p2 dot set y, it will be, let's say, you have to pass the value because you are changing the value, so you need to pass the new value. Let's say 22. Run your code. Oh wait, you have not printed, so we have just printed p2.x, which was 56, and the new value is printed. Again, you can print p2.setY as well, and it will print the value. So that's it for this video. In this video, we have covered the fields, constructors, getters and setter methods, and the private keywords. So starting from classes and objects concept, how the classes and objects are different, how you create an object, how you create fields, how you create constructors, and how you can access those fields and the setters and getter methods in the programmers class. Thank you. Bye-bye.